Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. The Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Futurist Society, where as always, we're talking in the present, but talking about the future. Today we have a very special guest, actually one of our listeners, Sage, the robotanist / Galactic Colonist. He's very interested in speaking with us. He contacted us, he's one of our listeners, and I'm so excited to talk with you because I don't often get the opportunity to talk one-on-one with our listeners, and this is a really exciting moment for myself. Tell us a little bit about why you reached out and a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, I reached out, as one might expect, because I'm really interested in discussing futurism. I mean, you listen to this kind of thing, go all over social media, pulling in different stuff about the future, about different technologies and ideas, all the fantastic things we're heading for, and the brilliant future. Then, I want to be able to chat a little bit about that. I listen to it all the time, so why not bring something back and say hello and see what we can, have a great chat about. My background is pretty broad, so I have a little bit of experience with a lot of different things. Like the robotanist thing comes up because that's kind of what I've been doing with drones, or degrees in botany and things like that. And I have been following futurism, transhumanism related topics for a long time. So
tell us a little bit about what makes you optimistic about the future, because that's the whole goal for the podcast, is to get people excited about it. I think that, when I see a lot of this stuff that's happening in the futurist articles or the technological progress we're making, it makes me very excited. For some other people, it makes them a little bit more concerned, but you're obviously a techno-optimist just like myself. So tell me from your perspective, what makes you hopeful about the future?
Well, I think a large part of it is the past. If we just look at the progress of technology, of humankind over the span that we have any kind of record for, it is basically positive. Sure, there are periods when bad things happen, when things are looking pretty grim. You can have the Black Plague spreading across Europe, or the onset of World War I. Terrible things do happen and there are setbacks. But as long as we keep moving forward, and we always have been, then there's no reason not to be completely optimistic about the way things are going and the trajectory long term that we're going to have an ever better and more brilliant future. Right now is the best time that it's ever been to be alive. And that's true worldwide. We can look at the statistics on, the number of people living in grinding poverty that keeps coming up. We can look at the ability to travel across the world in a matter of hours. You want to go to Europe? Okay, you can hop on a plane and do that. This is completely different from 200 years ago, when you had to at most hop on a cramped ship and sit there for, a month trying to get across the Atlantic. And even then, you probably were either doing it in a very uncomfortable, well, I guess the comfort hasn't improved as much as we'd like, but we're working on that too. But you would get there and either you had a lot of wealth to do this or you weren't doing it at all. It's not only been something that's become available to those who are in power or who have a lot of money to throw at these things, but it's continues to be ever more available to the broad spectrum of humanity. It becomes ever cheaper and more accessible. And we're seeing that faster and faster. The advent of AI is a great example of that right now. It's not just, once the researchers got a few things figured out, they're like, okay, now everybody can have access to this. We're going to throw it on the phone or on the basic internet. And people in third world countries can hop on their laptop and say, okay, now I have access not just to the sum of human knowledge that came with the internet, but we now have a person or an entity, I guess, however you want to frame that, that can now be a guiding system to understand that, to figure out where we want to go with it and take it to the next step.
I agree. I think that when I hear what you're saying, I think that it reminds me of that quote from Martin Luther King, that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. I think it bends towards progress. And I think that we are continuing to progress as a civilization. I don't know if that's met with the same kind of optimism from everyone, though. And I'm sure that you probably have people in your life or even family members that may not feel the same kind of optimism. And I'm always trying to spread the gospel of progress. I feel like everybody should be optimistic about the technological progress that is happening. But I think there's so much fear that's out there with a lot of these new technologies. There's people that are thinking that AI is going to be an existential threat. A lot of people are saying that we're closer to nuclear Armageddon than we've ever been. How do you reconcile those ideas or speak to those people that are in your social circles, maybe?
Well, I speak to them very positively and kind of disagree politely with them. That all of these things, I mean, every technology that we have, every solution that we've ever found, every step that we've ever gone forward brings with it challenges, potential problems, and we do have to be aware of those. We can't just, sit back and say, oh, nothing bad will ever happen from building more nuclear power plants. Something could. We have to be thinking about that. But the benefits so much outweigh the potential harms that to not do so is actually far more damaging than anything that is likely to happen, and we can mitigate any of those harms that are coming along. And, if you look at that historically, the same thing is going to be the case. People who refuse to move forward to embrace new technologies or new ideas, or simply decided that they were going to, put their head in the sand and say, no, this is evil, we should not go after it, tended to not do as well, to not find as much success, as happiness, progress as the people who embraced it and moved forward. And actually, when people change that perspective, their entire trajectory changed as well. We can look at something like the Arabia, or that region of the world, Middle East, where there was a period until about 1300 when they were doing extremely well, when they were the leaders in technology, when they were really ahead of most of the world. And then there was a shift in the culture, in the political climate, and they turned away from a lot of that and became far less advanced and capable of providing for themselves or for others.
Yeah, that's my biggest worry is that we become regressive as a society and we take steps backward. I don't think that that's going to happen now with the ubiquitous nature of progress these days. It's not isolated to a particular region or a particular technology. I think we're having technological progress in a whole number of different fields, but certainly you can feel that pushback. It is out there.
Oh, very much so. And there is a lot of emphasis on that. Our media environment tends to reinforce that, unfortunately. It's really always more interested in the negative than the positive. That's why we have so many people out there who think, this is suddenly turning and things are suddenly worse than they were 20 years ago, or even 50 years ago. So we're just going in the wrong direction and everything is heading toward disaster. It's just like, no, there's no evidence for that anywhere.
I like to when I'm talking with people, I like to ask them what brings them happiness in their own life, and oftentimes it is a lot of it does come from technology. Like for me, some of my favorite TV shows or video games that I'm playing are relatively recent. And that's something that I feel like is technologically progressing as well. What about you? What brings you happiness that you point to that, listen, like this is technology that may have not been available. And that's something that is very clear evidence that we're heading towards the right direction as a species.
Well, I've really been enjoying virtual reality systems. So getting in there and jumping in, you really get to experience things. For a while, you could just watch Star Trek and they're on the holodeck, and it's like, oh, man, I really want that technology. When does that become available? And so, we're making those first steps and just moving along with it and, getting the new technology and appreciating that is fantastic. Having the opportunity as it has become ever more democratized to do some of these things. So I can actually go out and, just pull up a quick tutorial. It's like, oh, I can build a lightsaber now. This is awesome.
That is huge. That is huge. Like the ability to learn things without having to do a really exhaustive research at like the library. That's amazing. You know, like you could pull up a YouTube video and, like you said, build a lightsaber or fix a door or, learn how to code. Those things have become ever more democratized, which is great.
Yeah, and the productive capacity is so cheap that you can do that too. You don't just have the knowledge to build a lightsaber. It's like, well, okay, so I need a circuit board for my lightsaber. Oh, okay, that's $5 on Amazon. That's great. I can order 5 of those, and even if I screw it up, I can still make this thing work. Uh, and so, everything is available in quantities that are frankly amazing. In just about any place you care to go to, they're more available than they've ever been. And so I really appreciate that opportunity to, do new things and to have new experiences. We're talking a little bit about some of the ways you can travel really, really fast and do different things. Now you can, have ski lifts that will just pull you up the thing. You don't have to try and learn by hiking it 500 times. You can just, take the ride. It's great. E-bikes will take you where you want to go right there. You can try going to whatever part of the world interests you, and now you have a translator that will help you communicate effectively in real time, verbally. I mean, you don't need a TARDIS to do this for you.
Yeah. We're kind of dancing around a lot of different science fiction topics like Star Wars and Star Trek and all those things. And, utopian science fiction is my inspiration, not only for the podcast, but also in just the research interests that I have. And I can tell it's obviously part of the inspiration for you. What are the utopian science fictions that you look towards as kind of like where you hope that we become?
Well, certainly, I think Star Trek has a big part to play in that. I grew up watching, Star Trek with my parents. Just even before I knew anything about it, they were just had it on, and I've enjoyed that. Which ones would be the most utopian? I don't know. I really like something even like Babylon 5, I guess. It's not particularly utopian, but it's always looking forward. It's this idea that we can build something bigger and better. And even with all of the challenges thrown at us or whoever we may meet out there, we can overcome them and succeed in the long term. I try to look at, I think, a lot more of that than trying to be too utopian about things, because I don't think a utopia is possible. It's a goal. It's kind of the what we look to as an objective, what we want to aim for. But I think there also has to be a realization that it's, just as it was originally written, a concept that is unreachable. So we always have to be moving in that direction. And the best science fiction or literature that we're looking for is about trying to always build that better world and find ways to move through the challenges, looking at all of the things that are going to get in our way, and then saying, okay, that's fantastic. So how do we overcome that? How do we get better? How do we choose how to move forward? Star Wars is kind of looking at that too. It's like, okay, so we've got this evil empire that's making it so everybody's lives are not as great as they could be. Let's go overthrow them. If you want to look at something like, I was referencing Doctor Who earlier, and that's a great one. Somebody's out there trying to fix things. And, there are small problems and large problems everywhere. And what do? Well, you become the doctor. You go out there and heal the hurts. That is the entire concept around that series.
Yeah. I think civilization is going to be messy. Society is going to be messy, but all in all, we are headed in a really interesting and I think positive direction. I'm so excited about so many different technologies. What are you most excited about? What topics like you just can't get enough of when you're reading about them?
Well, I think drone technology of late has been a big one.
Yeah. Yeah, huge. I mean, warfare aside, right? But like also just, personalized vertical takeoff and landing. I think that's going to be huge. Also, just like even like the drone technology has progressed. But I mean, you're in this space. What are you most excited about?
Well, I think the ability to use drones for transportation is going to be the biggest one in my mind, long term, because now we have what can be the flying car, finally. People have been wondering, where's my flying car for decades, but this really could be it. They have systems already that are autonomous, that can carry up to 2 people. They can do it safely over extended distances. And they'll automatically coordinate with the other vehicles, and you don't necessarily need the FAA to do a lot to intervene and all of that. So it'll be cheaper. It'll be point to point. You can skip the airport and trying to go through security, which is always lovely. And you can end up in these amazing places. It'll also be fantastic transportation for packages and shipping, because of course, Amazon's been working on that and they're getting closer, and there are a lot of other companies doing it. There's one, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but their basic focus is on trying to get emergency medicine to places, especially in the third world, where they're hard to get to. And you can just launch that, and instead of a couple days later when it might arrive, you can get it there in an hour or two, just flying over even these rough terrains. And that's going to be a huge improvement. So it's going to make the economics of transportation across the board just that much better, that much faster, that much cheaper, and improve lives of people all around.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the time where we can have easy access to personalized takeoff and landing technology. I think that's something that's going to be very interesting. I mean, I live in Boston, and I frequently go to New York, but just the whole going through the security and getting to the airport, all that stuff, it adds hours and hours of time. Whereas it's realistically a 3-hour drive. I just choose to go through the airport, and it's equivalent in time. It's just I either bring my car or I don't bring my car. But if I was able to cut that down in half, people could live in rural areas. I think it would also open up a lot of different places for human beings to live. Now we're kind of clustered around these cities, and they're just becoming these really large and ever expansive urban oases. But the rural side of America and also the rest of the world is kind of being neglected. And I think that's something that would really be awesome for people to get back into nature, to be living in these places and still have access to a lot of the amenities that a city provides.
Yeah, that will be fantastic if we can get more of that going on and improve our capabilities. And I think, we're going to see a lot of other technologies converging to make that happen. Artificial intelligence has been the big one that everybody's been looking at and talking about. And if you can implement that alongside the drone systems to automate this even further, then you're going to get a lot of advantages there. And I think it's going to help a great deal in terms of being able to simplify a lot of the tasks. Even something like farming becomes that much easier when you just say, hey, I'm just going to let the drone go out and identify the plants and poke at them. Maybe, throw some water on this one that needs it. This one's got a nitrogen deficiency. Let's take care of it, and we're getting to that point where we can do individual plants, right? Not just a whole field.
Yeah, I was looking into that. I mean, you might be a little bit more in the know about this kind of thing, but I was really interested in like vertical farming for a while. I had my own hydroponics setup, but the energy inputs and the productive outputs were never sufficient enough that some of these companies became profitable. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, but it definitely has an energy problem. There was a paper by Dr. Bruce Bugby from Utah State University that talked about that really well. And he points out that you have a particular issue when it comes to the cost of electricity and running LEDs versus the value that you can get out of the majority of crops. And you can do something that has basically very low biomass. A lot of these like microgreens and things are mostly water. And you can probably do some of those economically, but it doesn't go much beyond that. So if you're talking about grains or staple foods or things that are going to be needed in mass, it's just not feasible at this point. We have to find much cheaper ways of providing the energy to the plants, and that's going to require probably some whole biology, engineering of species, even more efficient lighting systems, and probably, picking up nuclear power as a really popular standard before we're ever going to get to that point. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of pushback on nuclear lately. So,
Yeah, well, I think that the tides are shifting, right? Like we're talking about it again, whereas like 20 years ago it was kind of like this really taboo subject. But I think right now I hear a lot more about it, like from people like you that are future thinking and really looking at the energy balances that we have and saying that we're going to need a ton more energy. But the reason why I brought it up is because that's something that's of particular interest to me. I look at the technology that's coming down the pipeline and I kind of filter it out from stuff that is going to give me the kind of life that I want. I would love in a perfect world to live in a rural setting, have my own farm, completely self-sufficient, energy independent type of setup. But with current technology, we're not there, and even just the idea of farming is so labor intensive. Realistically, I would only be able to do that if I had some sort of like robots helping me or some sort of technology that would be able to be a force multiplier so that I could make the food myself and not have to hire other people and bring other people in. And that's the kind of like back to basics kind of future that I want. We mentioned Star Trek. Like, if you remember from the Next Generation, Jean-Luc Picard had his own little winery that he would go back to, and it was being run by all of the best robots, and he was out running a starship, right? Like, he wasn't really doing anything, but he had the opportunity to come back and get back to basics when he needed it. That's kind of what like the oasis that I want, and I see a lot of the technologies that are coming down the pipeline that are going to be able to make that happen. And that's what I get really excited about. But what about for you? What kind of life in the future do you want, and what technologies are you really excited about that are going to be bringing that to fruition?
well, I think the biggest ones are enhancements in biotechnology, especially in the areas of cybernetics and medicine. Because I love the idea of regenerative medicine, of not just being able to repair damage, but to being able avoid significant aging or cellular degeneration, being able to keep people alive much longer in healthy and happy conditions, so that, we can do things that we never dreamed of before. Create societies that have people who have 5 doctoral degrees and 150 years of experience in multiple fields, coming up with things that you never imagined, working alongside artificial general intelligence systems to achieve things that would have been completely outside the realm of feasibility before as well. I mean, if you find that perfect farm that you're talking about, or that little patch of heaven, you got to enjoy it and make the most of it. Have time to appreciate those things, and go see and do all the other amazing things out there. It's like, what? I want to take a few years and just do a full tour of France. I can't probably do that with the way things are sitting right now, but if we can solve that in the future, that's great. A lot less pain, a lot less ache, and then we can, of course, do the enhancement side of it as well. If we get into some of those cybernetics or bioenhancements, you can have vision into spectra that no human has ever seen before. We can start moving and doing things faster than was ever possible. I love what's coming up with that. I can't remember what it was called, but it's basically the Transhuman Olympics for 2026 in Las Vegas, where, so we're finally going to have real high-level sporting competition where they're going to say, if you want to try some chemicals to improve your performance or something else, go for it. This is how we learn to improve our abilities. And that's just a first step in what we could do, going forward. Forget the scuba diving gear. I'm just going to go swimming and breathe the water because we've figured out how to make the body that can do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never really thought about so much of the enhancement portion. I mainly thought about quality of life. And I do know that there is that component of the transhumanist movement, which is, the longevity part. I'm a very, very big proponent of. I think that the idea of aging hopefully will be something that, we tell our kids about, that was like this disease that we got over, right? But also, what's interesting that you bring up is I know that there's this element of the transhumanist movement, which is about like performance and increasing your abilities as opposed to just like lengthening your health span. And honestly, I haven't really done too much research in it, but I do know that, just like you said, that there is this sporting competition that was coming in, and to be quite honest with you, like the most people that I talked to had a pessimistic view of it. They're like, thinking very much along the lines that these people are going to be very unhealthy and destroy themselves all in the pursuit of this stuff. But the people that I have talked to that are using these types of things judiciously are some of the healthiest people that I've ever met in my life. Like I do know a few people that are trying out peptides and for regeneration of cartilage and stuff like that for overcoming sports injuries, and they're not kooks, right? Like they're people that are very in tune with their health, more so than I am. So that's an interesting topic. Are you doing any of that stuff like in your own life at all?
I am not at present doing any significant stuff with that. Maybe a little bit of, like maybe let's get some metformin. We can work on seeing if we can improve a little bit of that, but nothing too major. I don't feel that I have the expertise or access to the expertise to make it most effective. I think part of the reason I'm so excited to see this at high levels of competition out in the open with lots of money behind it is that that's when we bring in the experts, the best people in this field, and who can say, look, this is what you should be taking. This will probably have the best effect. This is the research that we're going to do, so that we can get all of the information and then disseminate it to everybody to say, okay, so this is the best way to use this health in a safe and effective way to get the best benefit for everybody. Having it, always be a taboo and something that's terrible because, you can't, be enhancing or doing anything for sporting competitions means that it's never been as developed as it could have been, because we've been not only avoiding it, but actually demeaning it. And this hopefully will begin to change that as it comes out into the open. Yeah, a lot of people are going to have a negative opinion to begin with, but that is the case with many technologies, and it's one of those that we're going to work through, and having it be more visible and, hopefully become more popular, people will come around to it. That has been the case with many technologies, especially the ones that seem controversial at first. Anything that involves the human body, people get really, really antsy about.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is appropriate. There's so much snake oil that's out there. I think that there's a lot of false remedies, but also, I mean, I think especially with like the whole COVID pandemic thing, we've found that there's whole avenues of technology and science that are being neglected. And I think that sometimes those same voices are kind of pushed aside and discredited when they may be accurate, they may be beneficial. I mean, for example, steroids, right? Steroids are something that for the longest time were looked at as like this extremely negative thing. And rightfully so. There are a lot of pretty significant negative side effects to it. But now, like testosterone replacement, which is so close to steroids, right? It's like two hands it's just like a different type of performance enhancement. It's being sold everywhere. It's being sold on the Super Bowl ads and stuff, right? Like they're advertising it everywhere because there is this, some sort of idea that's like that's less negative for your body or something like that. And I think that it wasn't until relatively recently that that is something that became mainstream. But for a long time, it wasn't, And I think that that's one of the things that I learned about just like the whole after the pandemic is that science can come from anywhere. Like the democratization of science has become really interesting. I think in the past 5 years or so, that the ideas that are being presented are not just like immediately neglected anymore. Everybody has a much more open mind, I think, than they once did. And I think that it's just like a really interesting time to be a scientist. So not only are we having a much more open mind, but also technological breakthroughs are happening at an extremely rapid pace, right? And so it's almost hard to keep up with. Um, I can see how people can be overwhelmed by it, but I think that if you look at it from a positive mindset, I think all in all, it's super positive.
Yeah, this is actually one area I would like to see more popular science fiction kind of catching up with. It's some and one of the things that's always surprised me, even in something like Star Trek, or you don't see much of that kind of a transhumanist element. We don't. Everybody's pretty much your standard basic human as we would see them now. They have really great technology, but it's all external. They don't even have significant life extension capabilities from what I've seen on there. Although Dr. McCoy is kind of weird in that regard.
Yeah.
But it never gets talked about. It's something that's never developed. Whereas something like Sequest, suddenly you have a few people who actually have interesting modifications, and it seems to work out really well for them. And then there's ones that have been popular recently. The Expanse I really love. I think that's fantastic science fiction, but they seem to have a very negative view of any kind of modification. The few people we actually see who have anything like that going on are villains or people who are kept away from society because they're considered too dangerous.
Yeah, I think that the first thing that's going to be interesting to see is brain to computer interface. We're in the first fledgling stages of that, and I think they're doing it in a very shrewd way of using it as a therapy to help people, as opposed to immediately going to performance modifications. I think that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting, because especially with the augmentation with artificial intelligence, I think that that's going to be very, very much situation where it's going to be difficult to keep up with people like that. The old saying, right? And it's not an old saying, but like a relatively new saying that I've been hearing recently is that either you figure out artificial intelligence or you're going to be replaced by somebody who does. And that's what I think that the next step is. But the biological type of modifications, those are like very difficult to get through all the regulations and everything like that. So I do look forward to the brain to computer interface stuff. What specifically, other than like the longevity thing, are you looking for in regards to performance?
Well, like I say, I'd like to be able to, jump around like John Carter from, being able to do amazing athletic capabilities like that. I'd like to, be able to actually, even further down the line, have true body flexibility, I guess you could call it, where it's like, well, maybe I want this arm today, maybe I want the different arm today. It depends on what I'm doing, what I'm trying to accomplish. Maybe I don't want an arm, maybe I want a paw, maybe I actually want, have an animal tail. I mean, that could be really interesting stuff. Simpler than that, though, just an ability to take on things that can't maybe do right now, just a little flexibility and height, maybe get through that rock climbing challenge and get that 512 finally. A lot more robustness would be good in that regard. So if I crash the mountain bike, it's like, oh, well, that sucked. But pick yourself, dust yourself off. You don't have two broken bones that you have to deal with and walk around for a while with your holding your poor sides. Rapid healing will be a huge part of that. So much better repair set mechanisms than we have right now. Hopefully something that will be self-repairing where you have cellular stuff, but if it's nanites that do it as well, that's great too. Having direct and immediate feedback on all health issues, so you can have something floating around inside going, oh yeah, by the way, you may want to look into this particular issue. You might have something going on with cancer in 6 years. Just saying, have a look at it.
Yeah, we're in the fledgling stages of that. I think that there's a lot of primary care physicians that are going into that type of preventative medicine a lot more now. I'm actually looking into one of those myself. I'm joining a concierge medical practice that specifically focuses on longevity, and they measure my VO2 max and all these other indicators of longevity, and we're trying to work on it. So I'm looking forward to that also. I just wanted just to change gears a little bit, I really appreciate like the fact that we get to hear your perspective on this stuff. Like, what other media, like podcasts, are you normally listening to? Just that, are you listening to like all futurism stuff, or are you listening to science oriented stuff?
I listen to a wide variety of stuff. Futurism is great. I love to listen to people talking about it. But if we don't know what's going on now and we don't understand that, make the most of it, we don't get to the
Mhm.
futurism. We have to build that future. And so I try to have a pretty wide ranging perspective on things, listen to something earlier, just working on, okay, so this is the basic concepts around the derivation of I. And, basic mathematics to build on that. Looking at a walkthrough on how to develop fundamentals of AI using Python. How you actually do the wiring if you wanted to build your own drone system, and how to not have issues with it breaking down when you're mid-flight, because I had fun with that the other day while it was sparking off. So, different learning and projects are part of that. And I like to watch a little bit the politics on both sides, or I guess all sides. Both sides always seem so limited in thinking, but try to get a wide perspective to understand where people are at, where they're coming from, what they're suggesting. The technology is all fantastic, but if the politics don't align, if the culture can't get on board, it's going to be very hard to get these things done, to actually build the future, move it forward. And so I think that's an important part of it. And I like.
Yeah, I'm following a lot of that same stuff too. So it's nice to hear from your perspective, because I feel like people who are in this are usually following the same kind of stuff, and I'm very much interested in current events, but from a passive perspective. Like, I don't get as heated with the politics as some of my friends do. I don't get as heated with the news as some of my friends do. It's more like as an observer of history, just kind of seeing where we're going and passively hoping that we're going to make the right decisions. Do you feel like that too, or are you more like, you know, interested in active roles, trying to spread uh, activism in some way, shape, or form for a particular philosophy, whether it's politics or something else?
Well, I guess you could call even just being active in futurism a form of political involvement. So I'm actively futurist, actively transhumanist, trying to push these ideas and get them out there, and to see what's going on in the current political environment that's going popular that would align with that, or what different perspectives are being missed by the conversation that might move it a little bit forward. I agree that we shouldn't get particularly heated or extra emotional about these things, but involvement, I think, is useful toward building, the future that we want to see, because that's, like I say, an important part of the societal and political aspect. You have to get the laws to align in order to get some of these things done. That's one of the challenges that we're working with, especially in the biology field right now, that we have a lot of things that kind of get in the way of doing research. For a while it was stem cells. For instance, that they were saying like, no, you can't do that because, you're getting them in this way. Then they had to find a workaround to get a lot of that done. It's working much better now, but there are always things that are coming up. In some of the interesting discourse to look at with something like bodily autonomy is playing a bigger role. And the discussions surrounding transgenderism are playing a large part in that, and watching the discussions on different sides and how they're looking at that can be very informative on how they're going to approach other topics that are related to it, what people think of making choices about what you do with your body and when, and how people are going to look at it if you do this particular thing. I mean, we're talking about sports. There's that whole unfairness question again. So, if we're modifying people, then do we have completely separate categories? Or are they going to compete equally? These are questions that are going to need to be resolved, and they're going to obviously get people really excited because they already clearly are about the relevant related topics that are the current discussions of the day.
Yeah, very, very interesting time to be alive as a human. I think it's not something that I could have even imagined growing up that we would be talking about these kind of things. It's just the Chinese have a saying, "May you live in interesting times." I feel like we are living in the most interesting times of all times, and not only is it the best times of all times to be a human, it's much more comfortable. We have air conditioning. I'm able to talk to somebody that's halfway across the country via this amazing revolution called the internet, but also even just seeing what's happening on a daily basis in other countries and other states. It's just too much information at times. It's almost like information overload. So we do have to pick our areas of focus, and I appreciate the fact that you're choosing futurism, because I think that if you can make people think that progress is something that A is inevitable and B is for the benefit of human beings, I think it makes people locked in to the shared mission of humanity. I think that like they look at it and like, okay, if we're all going forward, we got to do this together, and it makes us confront these kind of difficult issues that you're talking about. But it always ends up shaking out to be what's best for humanity, in my opinion. Certainly there's some difficult times and conflict that oftentimes comes from it, but I do think that it does end up being an overwhelmingly positive experience. So you mentioned that you were doing other things about futurism, like you're trying to spread the word. What else are you doing? Like, because I'm also trying to do that. I'm also trying to inspire people and make people hopeful what's coming down the pipeline. But it's nice to hear from other people to like what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to get some more discussions going. I would like to actually get more opportunities to network and interact with other futurists. It's been one of the greater challenges to actually find and have these conversations because
Yeah,
futurists tend to be a rather dispersed group, especially for people who aren't living in major urban areas where you could kind of get close to them. If I already had my flying car, I'd be better suited to finding them. But as
yeah.
it happens at the moment, you don't have a lot of opportunity like this. These kind of conversations I would love to see more of. So, like regular weekly groups or something I'd like to push a little bit more of. I did actually
Mhm.
get my own YouTube channel going just to, kind of have a voice and talk about some of these topics in more detail, what I'm thinking about them.
Cool. You should plug it. What's your YouTube channel?
It's called Path of the Polymath.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love polymath. The idea of being a polymath in general. I think that it's so limiting to only be interested in one thing.
Well,
You
absolutely.
know.
I find everything interesting. It's one of those reasons I want to live indefinitely, be able to constantly learn and explore. It's what really makes
Exactly.
life worthwhile and meaningful to me.
Yeah, there's just like too much content out there. One of my favorite comic book story arcs was uh, this story arc in DC where Lex Luthor and this artificial intelligence are kind of battling and having a crisis of wills, right? Like the battle of wills. And his response to the idea for this artificial intelligence to leave us alone and to allow us to grow and flourish is that it's just so interesting to learn like what we're going to become, right? Like it's so cool to be a passive observer and just see this stuff happening. And I think that's one of the reasons why I also want to be alive. It's like I just look at the amount of content that's out there, the amount of video games that I'll be able to play, the amount of cool TV shows I'll be able to watch, like the amount of places I'll be able to see, or just the events to see that humanity goes through. I think is going to be super interesting.
Oh yeah,
So I
even
do hope that you're correct and that we get to that place, and not only are we explorers of the stars, which honestly I also want to talk with you about, but just we can be explorers of humanity itself and just overall knowledge. But why don't we talk about that? Tell me. I know that one of the introductions that you said is that you were a galactic colonist, and I think that there is this renewed interest in the space race. What are you hoping out of that title, and what are you hoping out of just the space race in general?
well, I am hoping that, one day in the not too distant future, I will be able to go to the moon and Mars and beyond, that I will be able to go and live on these worlds, actually start building societies and cities and farms and everything else, with the red soil outside, and find ways to work on converting that, to making things better world. That's one of the great things you can do with the robots too. You can send them outside and they can work on these things and help with a lot of that. That's another great direction for drone systems. We already found ways to fly them on Mars, so we just build on that and start doing more with it. It's going to be a little while before we can get there and sufficient quantities and with the right technology to make all these things happen. But there's nothing stopping us on the moon right now from building a nice little base. We could have done that some time ago if we'd really had the interest and support to do so. That's going to be a next great step.
Well, if Katy Perry can be in space, it's only a few decades before you and I are up there, man. I mean, honestly, I think everybody was making so much fun of her, but the way that I was thinking about it is like, if she can get there, it's not going to be too long for the regular person. It's like the first person that they send up for anything. It's very soon after that. That outside of like astronauts and things like that, but the first civilian that they send up there, it's not going to be too long for us, I think.
Well, yeah, and that was something I was thinking about on actually that YouTube channel. I was talking about the idea of space sports. So, not only do we get to go to space, but we do, if you're on the moon in 1/8 G, you can do some interesting stuff. And you can kind of start doing triple backflips that would otherwise have been basically impossible in 1G. We can start having stuff flying around the room and start doing forms of rock climbing, or where you just climb and jump right off because the landing's not going to hurt. There are a million different really interesting concepts. One of the best examples in science fiction where you can do that is the battle school from Ender's Game, where you can have everybody just floating around between the different objects, and they can do a whole mess of different novel strategies because of microgravity. So, that's one aspect that'll be a great deal of fun, and I'm looking forward to a lot. We're going to have to figure out how to, medically or, find some solution to microgravity issues from long duration spaceflight. But I don't think that's going to be a nearly insurmountable problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if I were to, and I'd love to hear your perspective, if I were to say like big problems that we're going to tackle, number one, it's going to be the energy systems. I think that once we get the energy systems right and dialed in, then it's going to be space exploration, and then it's going to be abundance. I think once we get it to space, the abundance issue is not going to, like, it's going to be ubiquitous, and at least that's my hope. I think that my biggest concern is that it's not going to be as democratized as it appears in Star Trek and some of these other more utopian science fictions. But honestly, like, even if my life was, if everybody's basic levels of needs were met, I think that most of humanity would sign up for that. Even if there was a certain class that had a different type of access to much better technology, like, it's going to be so marginal, the differences. I don't know. How do you think about it? Do you think it's going to be democratized?
I think it'll be mostly democratized. I mean, by the time we have nearly limitless energy and nearly limitless access to resources, which basically is what happens once we get space travel figured out sufficiently. It's just mining an asteroid will produce all huge piles of everything you want, and we don't have to do it on Earth, so leaving holes in the ground will no longer be necessary. Fantastic opportunities. And at that point, it's like, well, there'll be people who may have a little more power, but they won't have more resources because the resources will be everywhere. Everybody will have a lot of access to them, much like we're seeing, AI now. It's like, okay, I have my own little army of robots too, because it was so cheap to produce. They just threw them out there. And it'll basically become, if not something that everybody does independently, like a resource UBI, I guess you could call it. Just like, okay, so we've got some spare energy and some spare minerals or whatever. Have fun, build whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about something like medical provisions because the robots will be doing it better than the humans anyway. And so you just go to the RoboDoc and get that done. It'll be better than the systems that we see in Fallout. It's like, yep, just fix me up. Come on.
Can't wait. Yeah, can't wait. Well, listen, this was such an interesting conversation. Please keep in touch, and thank you so much for listening. I did want to start out a new segment that I have been experimenting with, which is my Future in Five segment. So I'm going to ask you five questions. Give me five answers that you would give for each single question. So, first one is name five thought leaders that you think are really going to contribute to the future over the course of our lifetimes.
Oh, um, hmm.
I know. That's why I put it as five, because you don't need to quantify them in regards to importance, but like, who are you listening to? Who are you following? Those people that maybe that might not even be giving a contribution to the future, but maybe that you're most interested in what they have to say.
I mean, I'm still listening to Ray Kurzweil.
Yeah,
Always
he's
enjoy his
huge.
stuff.
Absolutely. And I can help you out. I can give you mine if you need some prompting.
Well, I'm bad at names has always been the problem. It's like, it's that one person from that one thing that I was looking at just the other day. It's like,
Yeah. Well, I would say, like it or not, Elon Musk has to be in the conversation. I know that he is very polarizing, but the fact of the matter is that without him, we would not have a space program. I think that that's something that is very much on the forefront. I think, especially for lifespan, David Sinclair is somebody that I look at as, he's the one who kind of popularized the end of aging, right?
was it Sinclair that did that more, or was it Aubrey de Grey coming out of it?
Yeah, you're right. Aubrey is probably the first. He's, I think, the most widespread, though, right? Like most people, I would say more people know Sinclair than Aubrey de Grey, but that's a toss up. We could put those two as one. But I do love Aubrey. I had him on the show, actually. It was a really awesome experience. Our highest rated podcast, a lot of people. And it was just like a really interesting conversation because I'm deep into the longevity space. Like I can tell you the proteins that I think are they're going to be the most significant and stuff like that. But
Yeah, I would actually love to get deeper into it.
mhm.
It's one that I've kind of been on the periphery of, but it is one of the, if not the single most important problem we can solve right now, because if we get that right, then most of the other problems become a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else that you can think of?
Um,
So I also I gotta say I'm a big fan of Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. I think
oh yeah,
he's very much a proponent of like knowledge for everyone. I think that he's very much a democracy of knowledge for everyone is something that I think it has to go hand in hand with the future. It's somebody that I've been following for quite some time. And sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was
Yeah, no,
thinking, I like Peter Diamandis for some of that, and Sal Khan for democratization of knowledge. I would also say.
absolutely. Yeah. Those are two really, really cool guys that are in the mix. And then, yeah, I mean, I would have to say that, the Kurzweil is probably number one, though. I think that if it was not for Kurzweil, we would not really have any futurism, right? Even the term itself. I mean, the idea of like the computing power increasing exponentially over time and him extrapolating that out to so many different technological feats was just so mind blowing and has held up for really every single field. I can't really, say that it's limited to just semiconductors or processing power, right?
No, it's very fun.
But yeah, that's five. So let's go on to the next question.
Okay.
So what about books? Like, what are your top five books that you're reading right now? And it can be science fiction, it can be nonfiction, anything really.
Oh, let's see. Well, right now I'm into a good one that is the Science of Discworld.
Okay.
So basically, it's a book that describes some science through basically building a concept of the Earth and of physics and chemistry and all those things, done through the perspective of the Discworld series of novels. And so basically, the wizards and the unseen universe to get together and basically run our world or our universe as an experiment. It's very
Cool.
interesting perspective. Um,
All right, you gave me one, I'll give you one of mine. So I'm reading Peter Thiel's Zero to One, because he's obviously in the mix. He's being talked about left and right with all this stuff in the politics, and so he wrote this book about startups and like his view on technological progress, and I'm reading that right now. It's really really interesting.
No doubt. I'll have to get to that one eventually. And we were talking about her as well, so I'm also reading The Future is Nearer. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I'm reading a book on Bayesian probability, which is like using it to predict stuff. It's predictive statistics, and it's called Everything is Predictable. I think so much of futurism is like not only like being a passive observer, but having opinions on where you think stuff is going to go. Like a lot of the stuff that you said is stuff that you hope that it's go, but also like your own opinions. And part of I think being a futurist is seeing the trajectory and kind of making like internal bets on it. And so I want to get better at that. So I'm trying to read that.
probability is definitely good. Um, just working on one at the moment that is basically the drone development and artificial integration systems.
Okay. Yeah. Are you going to try to start up like your own drone company, or are you mainly using it for your research?
Well, I'm going to do some of both. I actually would love to start a drone company that focuses on research. I think, the ideal would be something like, okay, so I'm marketing all of my drone and AI capabilities to different fields that need better research tools, especially over range. And then I just travel around the world flying this thing. So that would
That's
be
pretty
awesome.
cool.
And yeah, that's the company I'm going for. It's like exploration robotics.
Wow. That's awesome, man. Best of luck to you. It's so super interesting. Okay, cool. So that's five. Now let's go on to what are your top five science fiction, um, I would say inspirations. I mean, I'm going to start with Star Trek because we already talked about it, but what about you?
Let's see, science fiction inspirations. Well, I mean, that's definitely a good place to start. Uh, I think something like The Expanse would actually be in there. It's looking at
Mhm.
relatively near future achievable stuff. Um, like I say, it lacks a little bit less transhumanism and perhaps a little bit less utopianism than others. But I think that also points to something that we could say about a better future, if not a perfect one.
Yeah, I like The Expanse a lot. Definitely into that. I really enjoyed the Minority Report movies. Like, I think that near future science fiction to me is like the most interesting, to see a vision of the future that's almost tangible. It's something that's really close. I mean, a lot of it was I feel like unrealistic with like precognition and stuff like that. But the ideas of like having interesting abilities like open screens and stuff like that. I mean, that's we're in that now.
Oh, absolutely. Um, oh god, what's it called? I think Ready Player One was a great inspiration.
Uh, Dude, if we can get one of those, sign me up. Just take my money.
Absolutely, that kind of level of immersion, that perfect opportunity to jump in and be whoever and do whatever and go wherever. That is fantastic. I look forward to that much.
Yeah. I think that's going to be really awesome. I'm a big fan of Star Wars. Obviously, it's very prescient. I don't know if you've seen the new Andor series, but like it's just so applicable to like all of the chaos that's happening in the U.S. right now, in the world right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go watch it. I've kind of been avoiding some of the newer Star Wars series, but
Yeah, they're not all great, but this one's good.
fantastic. I'll definitely look at it.
Yeah. So I think that's five. Let's move on to the last thing. So five areas of technology that you're really hoping will, or that you're really interested in. I think we talked about, some of them, but certainly, just like as an overarching view, like what can't you get enough of? Like when you see something in the news that you're really super interested in, what are you looking at?
Well, I think number one has to be what we were, discussing about regenerative medicine and longevity science. It's like, oh my gosh, there was a new mouse study out. Okay, I'm going to go read the paper. I'm going to go watch all the videos on it. I got to, see if I can get some feedback from the researchers.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that stuff. Always waiting and with bated breath to see what's new. And
For me, it's humanoid robots.
okay,
If
cool.
we can have personalized humanoid robots, that is the future for me. Like it's going to be, the guy that washes our dishes, the maid that cleans up after us for dinner. Oh my God, that's going to be game changer.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm also always very excited with new space science and technology. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
something just dropped launch costs. Oh, we got this, new mining technology, or we just managed to grow a new species in microgravity. It's like, oh, this is all fantastic. Tell me more.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the Starship tests. I saw the last one live, and I mean, it just looks so beautiful coming up. If we can get that to go up, if they can catch it with those chopsticks, oh my God, I'm such a fanboy when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I actually want to see SpaceX do well, but I want to see more other companies coming along. I want to make it a true space race and really have them all pushing each other.
Yeah, yeah, that would be cool.
Hear more from Sierra.
Yeah, AI obviously is one of those that we're probably underselling in this conversation. I think that's going to, like I was telling you, I'm following Sudhir Pichai, and he likens it to this is going to be as profound as fire or electricity or the internet. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface with it.
Well, I think so too. I guess one of the reasons I've been not talking about it as much here is simply that I think it's become so ubiquitous in conversations everywhere and about everything for very good reason. It is going to have a profound revolutionary impact on everywhere and everything.
Absolutely.
But in some ways, that does mean that other aspects get left behind a little bit. So it's fun to talk about those as well and kind of look at other areas.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's gonna be really interesting to watch. I wish I was more involved with that stuff. My background is medicine, so I'm seeing a lot of those revolutions come in. But the AI revolution is something that I'm looking at as a passive observer. Do you use it at all in your own life? Do you use like Claude or ChatGPT?
I was using ChatGPT and Gemini earlier today for various purposes. And sometimes they're just fairly laid back things. I was actually doing costuming design on them.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's like we got an upcoming convention. Okay, so let's go see what kind of costume we want to do. So ChatGPT, if I was going to try to do a fantasy monk character, well, give me some feedback and concepts on that. It goes and draws half a dozen pictures, and it's like, oh, okay, I like that.
Yeah, yeah, that is pretty awesome. I love the image generation. I do that with my daughters. They're like, what do you want them? What do you want to have a picture of? And they're like, I want to be riding a unicorn Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it makes them like, riding this thing, and they're just like so amazed that this thing can just pop out these images. Like that's going to be their norm. Like they will never understand a time before that, which I think is so interesting.
It will be, yeah. I mean, we get really find it fun for a lot of different things. When I was trying to figure out where to or what to do with the business concept and what part of the market to target. That's what I was asking them. It's like, looking around, what would you suggest? And they threw out some ideas based on a level of knowledge of the market, a depth of, background and reading and material that's out there that I probably would never have been able to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Very astute in like coming up with plans. I feel like it's next level when it comes to that. So, last topic is I cannot wait until we have mech suits. Like to me, when I think about the future, the biggest, lowest hanging fruit is some sort of robotic augmentation of like strength in a mech suit type of fashion. Like whether it's like the one in Aliens that Ripley gets into and fights off the aliens with, or like Gundam, or any of these Japanese inspired mech suits. But man, if we can get giant robots fighting each other, that's going to be the Super Bowl that I watch.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I guess on the other side of that, I'm looking at cognitive enhancement.
Yeah.
I want to be able to keep track of all these different things. And even if the news cycle is going and talking about 500 different elements, I can keep track and keep up all of this stuff and use that to build all the other things that I want to see.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty awesome. Well, listen, I feel like we could talk forever. This has been our longest podcast thus far because I feel like we're like-minded people. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to all of the other listeners that are out there. If you'd like to get on the podcast, feel free to email me and we'll get you on. It was so interesting talking to Sage. Best of luck to you, my friend, in the future. And for those of you guys who are tuning in on a regular basis, we will see you again in the future. Have a great day, everybody.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.